Hey folks, this is Adam Pratt with Chaos to Memories, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some things that I've been testing and learning about scanning scrapbooks and photo albums. Now, you see me here capturing everything with a digital SLR, but what I'm going to really focus on is what happens after that. Now, I do all of my scanning with a very high resolution DSLR. It's over 50 megapixels, but this workflow will work regardless of how you capture the album pages and scrapbooks. The resolution of my camera is very high, but it's not quite high enough to get these large scrapbook pages at 600 ppi. So in this case, I captured two captures of each page, just offset so I get the whole thing. Depending on your scanner, the size, the resolution of your camera, however you're scanning, you might have to do 2 or 3 or 4 or more captures, whatever it is. But this workflow will work the same regardless of the number of captures. So the first thing I'm going to do here is select all of these images, and you'll notice that they're sideways because of how I scan them. I want to rotate them, so I'm just going to press Command right bracket. On Windows, that would be Control right bracket, and it's just going to rotate those into place. It takes just a second. The next thing I'm going to do with this pair of images is go to the Photo menu and go to Stacking and choose the Group into Stack command. The keyboard shortcut that you'll notice there is Command G or Control G on Windows, and that just logically groups these two photos into like a little group of thumbnails. And I can expand or collapse that as you see there. In this case, I only have one stack that I'm using as an example, but if I had maybe a 100-page album that I was scanning, this would be really helpful. I would select each pair and press Command G, Control G on Windows, and it would group them into pairs. The value of that is the latest version of Lightroom not only photo merges, combines these multiple exposures into one combined photo, but it also has the ability to do that in batch. So it would literally batch merge all 100 pages of this album for me if I had 100 groups. In my example, my group, my stack is just 2 images. If yours was 3 or 4 or more, you would just group the right number of photos that were all from that same spread or same page and group those into a stack. And now the magic happens. With that stack selected, or ideally all the stacks from the entire album selected, you just go to Photo, Photo Merge, Panorama. You can do the edit in Photoshop, merge to Panorama in Photoshop. Occasionally I will find that helpful if something's not working as expected in Lightroom, because Photoshop has a few extra options, but generally this works really well for me right in Lightroom. And I do that here with this command. Again, I'm going to process just one page, but if I had multiples all paired up in stacks, it would process them automatically. So that's going to combine those. When it does the batch version, it doesn't even show this dialog box, it just does it, but I get this preview, I say, yeah, that looks great, and I say click merge. And it takes a second because these are very large files. I think the raw files from my camera are about 80 megabytes a piece, so it's taking 2 of those, combining them into one big super duper file, and you'll see the results just in a moment here on the right. Again, takes a few seconds, but it's sure faster than me doing it by hand. So when I do a scanning project like this for a client, typically I will deliver scans of the entire page as well as scans of every individual photo, giving them kind of the maximum flexibility. So to help me set that up, I combine the scans, these merged scans, and the collections feature here on the left hand side. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a collection set. No photos are going to actually go in this. It's just a way to keep things organized. So I'll call this scrapbook and click create. Easy enough. Notice I still have this page selected. Again, I'm just using a simple example so you can understand the concept. Now I'm going to right click under scrapbook, and I'm going to create a new collection inside that. So this collection is going to be called Pages, And notice it's going to go inside the scrapbook collection that I just created, or the collection set. I'm going to include the selected photos, in this case just this one page, but in a real world case I would select all the pages that I had merged. But I'm not going to make new virtual copies yet. I'll explain that in a second, but just click Create. So what this does is it says this page or any of the other pages belong in the Pages set for this scrapbook. Now, when I deliver this content, I want to deliver all the pages separately from all of the individual photos. I just think it's a tidier delivery. So to do that, or to get set up for that, again, with this photo selected, I'm going to right click on Scrapbook and I'm going to create a new collection inside that. And this one is going to be called Photos as opposed to Pages. And over here, you kind of see that pattern. Now again, I'm going to make sure this collection goes inside the Scrapbook collection set. I'm going to include the selected photos, but this time I am going to do something new, make a new virtual copy. I'm not going to get into all of what that entails, just trust me, it's awesome. The essence of it is I'm getting extra copies of this file without actually making copies of it on my hard drive. And because this photograph, this merged photo, is probably hundreds of megabytes, that's going to save me a lot of hard drive space, and it's going to save me a lot of time because it's going to be faster to process. So I'll click Create, and now I have the page and the photos here inside that collection. Okay, so at this point I have two options of how I want to process this this page. So if I double click that, you can see 1, 2, 3, maybe 15, 17, 18 photos or something like that on this page. You have two options. There is a feature inside of Photoshop that will batch, crop, and straighten, or I tend to be pretty meticulous about this stuff. I actually tend to do them by hand. I love things that are fast and efficient, but I also really like quality. So there's a trade-off there. So let me just show you both options. So the first option is the Photoshop command. So I can choose Photo, Edit in Photoshop. And if you had a bunch of these, you could export all of the merged photo layouts to a TIFF file, open those in Photoshop and kind of go that way. But I'll just show you this as an example of this one-off image. So it pops this over here. The one thing I'm going to do before I run this command, just so that it's not confused by anything, is I'm going to use the crop tool. I can jump to that with the letter C. And I'm going to crop out the background, that gray checkerboard. That's just the background of the copy stand that I work on. And so I don't want any of that kind of confusing this command that I'm about to run. Now all of my photos are pretty clearly isolated on their backgrounds, and you can see as I zoom here, really high resolution on these really old photos. So the command that I have in mind is under Automate. There's this feature called Crop and Straighten Photos. Let's see what it does. It's pretty amazing. Really, in just a couple seconds, it's going to work on that photo, and it's going to isolate every single individual photo it can find and put them on a separate canvas in Photoshop, basically make them separate files. If they are crooked, it's going to rotate it, especially on these old scrapbooks. That's really common. I don't know if people did it that way by design or by accident, but it's super common. It's going to process and give it a second, and it's done. So in the window menu, you can see that it created, it looks like about maybe 18 copies of different files. So I'm just going to go through the windows here. I'm just using some keyboard shortcuts to switch. I know several of those photos looked kind of identical. They were actually different. But you can see here, again, it's not perfect. There's a little stuff on the edge. That's the kind of stuff that I like to tidy up so I give a really, really clear deliverable to my client. But as I'm just filling in here, again, that's what it started with. And here are the results. And that took, I don't know, maybe 10 seconds in Photoshop. It's pretty awesome results. And then now it would be, the task would be just to save all of those out as individual files. Give them file names, give them a sequence number. You could batch rename them later, but that's one process right inside of Photoshop. So we're back in Lightroom because I want to show you the other option, the other way to process all of these individual images. Now, in between takes, I counted up the images and I think there are 18. So I have one virtual copy already. That means I need to make 17 more virtual copies. So basically, the end result is I have one virtual copy of this photograph for every photo on the page. So I would literally press Command and apostrophe. That's the keyboard shortcut to make a virtual copy. Not that you would know that, just trust me. Command or Control in Windows and apostrophe 17 times. Ready? I think I did that right. So now we have, as you see in the film strip down here, it looks like we have 18 copies of the same file, and you see that the photos count here kind of increased to 18, but it didn't actually duplicate anything on my hard drive, right? I don't have 18 copies of this 300 megabyte file. It's just kind of renditions of this file, notions of it. And so what I would do here is grab the crop tool, which in Photoshop, in Lightroom, it's the R key, and I would just click and press return. And I would jump to the next photograph. I'd click, drag, hit return, jump over, click, drag. Now you'll notice that this is not as fast. This is not going to be as fast as the process that I showed you in Photoshop. However, it's going to be a little bit more precise. I can crop in and out and tweak. Let's look at another. Let's look at another photo. You see this one is a little crooked, so I can click, and maybe I want to rotate that a little bit. Again, the Photoshop script does a pretty darn good job, but sometimes I'm a little picky. And so it's up to you. I just wanted you to see both options. But the results in the end are both amazing, both very efficient. And I would just go through here and finish it up. So at the bottom here, you start to see all of the individual photos kind of popping out of the canvas. And I would just go and go and go until I'm done. One of the reasons that I like doing this work in Lightroom, even though it's not quite as fast, is I do get a little bit better quality because I'm doing the crop. The other benefit is then when I would export these files as JPEGs, for example, that I could control the file renaming and the process of saving all these files out and renaming them is definitely faster. So in the end, the whole process might be a toss-up. But I hope that's helpful. Hope it gives you a few ideas to think about how you might tackle your album and scrapbooking scanning process a little bit faster with Lightroom.